We heard about customer service and customer service automation. I would like to ask on stage Georg Wenk. Please join me here while we slowly switch over to your slides again. My colleague will bring you a micro in a second, then you have that as well. So Georg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you are head of CRM and data science at Paysafe. And you'll be sharing with us your story, your case. We really asked you about your learnings and your journey from an ideation phase where you were talking and looking through cases to use in data and AI towards really an implemented case throughout your company. And what we found so interesting is that Paysafe, you are now, of course, a huge organization, payment provider. You have different products and offerings, but at some point you were still small, you were growing, and nevertheless you were looking into cases for data and AI. So this is, I think, an interesting insight. And so now is your few minutes of glory. We are looking forward to your insights to this interesting case, and I will join you later for all of your questions. And please remember, ask your questions. You have time Q&A in Slido to pose all of your questions. Please, Georg.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Okay, so good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Georg Wenk. I'm going to show you what we as an organization learned over 4 years of using AI in production. I hope there will be something that everyone can take some value out of and maybe apply in your own business. So, and sorry for any scientists, but I'm going to use machine learning and AI interchangeably and just mean, what businesses are doing with this, applying computational statistics on large data sets, to find patterns, make predictions, and these kind of things. Just a second on Paysafe. We are a payments company, mostly online payments. We are focusing on markets that are highly regulated, and we are in the Vienna business unit. We are focusing on digitizing cash, so trying to making it available for customers to pay for online purchases in cash. And since we have got a few banks here as well, we also partner with financial institutions, for example, N26. So this is a neobank that doesn't have a costly branch network, but they can use our extended network of point of sales to allow their consumers to deposit money to their bank account or withdraw money from their bank account, and they don't need to run branches or ATMs. So our AI journey started in 2017, and basically it started with a naive question. So AI is a nice fancy technology. A lot of companies are applying it with some success. And what can we do with that? And you might notice that this might not be the best approach, because usually would have to identify a business problem first and then find the right technology to solve it. And a couple of companies in the recent years fell into this trap when they tried to find a use case for blockchain. So, but in the end, this approach worked out for us. And yeah, so now we've been using it since 2018. We at Paysafe, we are using AI in different domains. We're using it to detect fraud and money laundering. We use it in customer segmentation for marketing. But today I'm focusing on our use case in customer service, because this is the one that I'm most familiar with. We started off in 2017, and basically what we did is a workshop, a design thinking workshop, to find use cases where we can apply AI and prioritize those use cases. And we immediately saw that this customer service use case that I'm going to explain was the most important one for us. So we did a proof of concept. We saw that our first approach might not be the best one, so we had to redesign and only then go to implementation. And we had great support in this process from Accenture. So the outcome of this is Roby, our customer service robot. What it does is basically we receive messages from our customers in our customer service team. Usually they would be dealt with manually. And we built something that can automated some email replies here. So we achieve 2 goals. One is, of course, reduce manual work and cost. Customer service is expensive, especially if you have a lot of customers like we do. And also we get a reply back to the customers quickly. So they don't need to wait a few hours until an agent gets to the case and deals with it and replies. So, and I think we achieve both. So how does this work? Okay, I thought it would come in step by step. So sorry for overloading you with a big slide now. So I'm going to try to point out the pieces that you should focus on. It goes from left to right. So we get customer service contacts in different channels, but we're going to focus on the written channels, emails and web forms, and ignore the others. We want to see the messages that we don't know yet what it is. So customers say something like, okay, I can't log in, or my account is locked, or how does a product work? Anything. And so we get some text. And we feed this into our message classifier, which is the actual AI piece. And I'm not going to in the technical details for this. Maybe this is for later for the Q&A. But anyway, we noticed that the texts by themselves are not usually very expressive. So customers tend to write us very short messages, not always be very clear. So we needed additional information to actually find out what they need in an automated fashion. And this is where this piece comes in. So we take additional information from our backend application, from our payment application, on the customer and the customer's transactions. So you can think of any kind of account status or the last transaction's error codes, something like this. And then the message classifier gives you a topic. So what was this message about? Was it a login issue, for example? And it gives you the confidence of how sure the model is that this is actually really a login issue. And then we move over to the rule engine. So we feed this into the rule engine, which is not AI. It's just criteria defined. And we look up certain criteria. So can we actually send an automated email for this topic? And are we sure enough that we actually do this? Because we don't want to spam customers with irrelevant emails. So we try to target this. And if this gives us then an email template we're going to send, and the customers receive this email, and we are explicit that this is an automated email. We are saying, yes, this is Robo, or customer service robot. And if this does not solve the customer's problem, they can still just reply, and the case then goes to a human agent. So this now has been live since 2018. So I'm trying to summarize what we learned as an organization on how to implement this, how to run this over the years. And I hope there is something that you can take from this talk. And if there's one thing you take from this, it's actually this one. The commitment from the subject matter experts, from the business, this is really crucial. AI is not a technology topic. It's something for the business. If you don't have the commitment and the time committed and the support from the business itself, in our case, the customer service experts, who know our customer service processes, who know the customer problems, who know how to solve it, without their support, you won't do anything useful. The best data scientists won't give you a great implementation without this support and commitment. And you don't just need them during the implementation phase. You also need their support on the long run. So my suggestion would be to actually make person in the business responsible for this, to drive the improvements, to expand the use case, and to do the maintenance together with the technology team. But the responsibility should, in the end, lie with the business, because it's something for the business, in this case, the customer service department, so they should drive it. Without their support, it won't work out. Next one seems obvious. If you're doing some kind of modeling, you need training data, usually a lot. And you need it early because, as you probably also know, if you do any AI implementation, you're going to test different approaches and find out which is the best, basically based on your own individual use case. And You might think that you have the data because you might have collected a lot of data over the years, but that might not be true. At least that's what we learned, because we use data that changes over time. So as I mentioned, the customer's account status, for example. It doesn't help me to know the account status now when I'm training a model now. I need to know the customer's account status at the time when they sent us the message. And if you think about not just one account status, but 40, 50 more features in this model, so you can imagine that you need to build some infrastructure to collect this data and then probably wait some time. For us, it took a few months to collect enough data to actually train the first models that were successful. Yeah, next up is the theme of skills. So development for data science in the sense of applying the statistical libraries in Python or R is not the same skill as general software development. If you have a great data scientist with a lot of statistical knowledge, that's great, but it's not might be the right person to implement even a simple application, a simple but production-grade application that wraps an AI model into a web service. These are just different skills, and maybe you're lucky and you find some person that does both, but this might not be true. And if you have bigger teams, bigger projects, then you probably don't have this issue. But in the long run, if you want to just maintain a project, an implementation, you might not have the same varied skills of different data scientists as you had during implementation. So keep this in mind. Next up is, if you're running this for some time, you might notice that the KPIs that you apply on your model, so that the KPIs that you optimize your model for, might no longer be the right ones. Over time, business changes, customer behavior changes, products change, at least that's how it works in our business. So you have to review this from time to time. And again, based on our example in customer service, there were two changes over time. First, we basically optimized for accuracy, meaning the model should be very good at predicting the topic. But to send out the automated emails, we also needed a high confidence. So the model should also be quite sure that this is the correct topic. So now we optimize the model for both accuracy and the confidence. And another change we implemented is that first, we try to identify as many topics as possible. So we had a classifier to try to distinguish about 35 classes or so. And of course, the more classes you have, the harder the problem gets, and the lower your accuracy will be. But we don't want to send an automated email for all the topics that we receive. So we merged similar topics into buckets, reducing the number of topics that the classifier has to distinguish, and so increasing the overall accuracy a bit. And then something quite specific, again, to the theme of skills. We used basically, first is Azure Machine Learning as a platform. And now we're exploring Amazon SageMaker. And these are very similar platforms, cloud-based services that allow you, to train models, to do all this stuff that you do for this, and host it, maybe even expose a web service and these kind of things. So feature-wise, they're not that different, at least for our use case. But they need quite different skills to actually use. Whereas SageMaker very much follows this infrastructure as code approach, meaning it exposes APIs, and you need to write some code to integrate these APIs, to build a pipeline to your definitions. Azure Machine Learning follows a very low-code approach, so you might only need a few scripts that you insert into a visual workflow. So make sure that the skills of the people that you have and the infrastructure that you're using actually match. So for us as an organization, and I think this will be similar for most companies that start off on this, AI is a journey in the sense that you might not want to get out a big implementation that has all the bells and whistles, but rather release something that works, but release early. be transparent about what it can do and what it cannot do, and then learn from this. So you will learn that it takes some time in the business to just for maintenance. And this effort is something you need to calculate with in the beginning. Use an iterative approach if possible. Add use cases over time. Don't try to do everything at once in the beginning. I guess this is a learning that's similar to other software development projects, but here it's definitely also worthwhile, especially if you haven't used this technology before. And this one is basically just meaning AI is just another technology. It's not a magic bullet. It won't solve a broken business model or bad processes. It won't double your revenue just by itself. That's not going to happen. So you really need to know what you're doing here. And you need to apply it where it really makes sense. Just to give it some perspective, in this message classifier that Roby, the customer service robot, uses, the message classifier is only right in about half of the cases. This doesn't sound great, but if you compare it to random guessing, which would only be 2% of cases, that's quite good. But this also means that we are not handling the majority of customer service cases automatically. The majority is still handled by humans. And actually, we also need the humans for labeling the data, so that they still work on cases. They still say, okay, this is this topic, this is this topic, this is a login issue, this is a payments problem, whatever. Because we use this as training data. You know, we have to retrain every couple of months to adapt to the changes in the business. The product might change, all these kind of things. So don't expect anything magic. It's not magic. Even if though there's a lot of overpromise going on, you know, when it's marketed. But it's just another technology, and you should treat it as such. So now I'm coming to the end, actually, already. So we have been using Roby for 4 years now. It's sending automated emails. It's earned back its operational cost, at least, quite quickly. Running this on Azure or SageMaker is not expensive. Human manual work is expensive. Even if you outsource to somewhere where labor is cheap, it's still expensive. So if you have any use cases where the volumes are there for the training data, do investigate it. But we also found that we had a lot of use cases identified where we then found out, okay, the volumes are just not there. Maybe your business isn't selling thousands of times per month. Maybe your business isn't doing this operational process thousands of times per day to get to the volumes of data that you need. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Georg, for the views. I think there was something in there for both the large corporates and then also for like the scaling ones. And why am I mentioning the scaling ones? Because you said it's a journey. Yeah. So what is the right timing from your experience of starting with this journey?
Basically, when you identify a problem that you have, and it might make sense to introduce AI. If you're referring more to the size of the company or the age, then I would say, if you're a very small startup, of course, there might be something, your business model might be something that has a lot of volume in some area. I don't know, you have an app and you have a lot of users and something where you can apply AI. Yeah, maybe do it. Maybe you might need outside help for this. You probably will need this outside help anyway, even if you're a larger organization, if you have never done this before. Or you might just take the approach and hire a lot of data scientists and do that. But I guess this is kind of a hard challenge. At least it's my experience. If you're growing, so I mean, just to give you some perspective, Paysafe is larger, like 3,500 people, but the organizational business unit that did this is just like 250 people in Vienna. So in this context, we implemented this. It's not all 250 people working on this, it's just within this context. And this worked out fine, but we had the outside support. So yeah, it worked fine.
So that's maybe the right wording. How much was outside support? How much was in-house? Because this was the question from one of you, from the audience. And then also, how did you kickstart this journey? Also alone?
As I said, we got support from Accenture, and in the beginning, the outside support was the majority of the manpower and knowledge, and we only started to learn how to do that, and then hired a data scientist and started driving this on our own and phasing out the outside support. So, and this made sense for us as a business. You know, in the beginning, we didn't have the know-how. We learned. So.
And maybe can you share some KPIs? What kind of impact did it have on your company? It can be quantitative or qualitative as well. In your scalability, on your business model, what kind of impact did it have?
So specifically for this customer service use case, I don't have an ROI number for you. But as I said, we do expect at least the operational cost quite quickly, because running computers is cheap. It might be harder to earn back the quite significant implementation cost in the beginning and the personnel expenses that you have. Data scientists are not cheap. And then if you look at other domains, like the fraud and money laundering prevention, this is something that we have to do anyway. You know, it's a regulated industry. So it has an impact, even though some of these problems are very hard. If you think about fraud, it is a tiny amount of the business that you're doing is fraudulent. So there's not a lot of data. It's hard to get clearly labeled data saying this is actually fraud. To distinguish fraud from non-fraud is not easy. And the same is even harder for money laundering, because it's, even less. But it does have an impact. And here, with customer service, a few % of requests are handled automatically. And we are adding additional use cases in the sense of emails and the rules for these emails over time. But this takes time to come up in the customer service department, and then also to evaluate if the rules that are defined actually make sense.
And then just to recap, because you mentioned a lot of details already, but our participants do have some questions like, was this supervised or unsupervised? Like I said, you mentioned already a few things, but still to recap once more.
Yeah. So the modeling we used is supervised. So we have customer service cases in our CRM that are labeled with the topics. We had to change the label structure though. So in the beginning, the existing legacy topic list, so to say, was not suitable for machine learning. So we had to change this. This refers to the business being open to change the process, because it's a new process running next to and within their own processes. And in the end, it's a classifier distinguishing like 35 or so classes. We're looking at the text and additional features from a backend. So it's 2 steps in case you want to know. So one is NLP, logistic regression on document frequency versus inverse text frequency. The other way around, yeah. But you get the gist. So we look at the terms which are most relevant for a specific topic, optimize for this, and then on top of that, we add the account statuses, or see if an account was actually locked for suspicion of fraud, and then add this.
And then when looking back, is there something that you would have totally changed in your approach?
So there's one thing I would definitely keep.
That's also good. That's very important.
The iterative approach. So doing this proof of concept first, really seeing if the data that you have is actually contains information that you need. So, and we found the text alone don't do that. So that's where we found we needed the additional information from the backend system. Without it, we wouldn't get to the level of accuracy that we need. But what I would probably change is not try to predict the topic of the messages that we get, but rather try to predict which email reply we should send. So basically skip this rule engine part that I showed earlier, get the email message or the email template that we are sending back to the customers predicted. This might work, might not work, I don't know. It's quite a different approach, and we didn't test it in depth.
And now we talked about we talked about the journey, and what about the future? What is coming next? So you talked about one case. What else do you want to try with your team? Where's the journey going?
So at the moment we are investigating basically more better focusing our anti-fraud measures. I can't go into the detail too much here, but basically we are locking certain transactions for suspicions of any kind, and we want to target this better. Also, we have generic, so basic rules in place, no machine learning at all, that also try to prevent fraud and other kind of bad things we don't want to have in our business. And we want to target this more than we already do. So any customer whose account will lock and they're actually a good customer will be angry. So we want to avoid this. We have processes to do that. We want not to lose customers because of this, but we have to do that. So we don't want that our product is used by fraudsters. We don't want that we get a bad reputation and business partners cut us off and anything like that. And also the regulators, of course, are looking very closely. So yeah, that's one of the things we are investigating now. And there will be other things later.
And you mentioned this is something for your area, maybe a tricky question, but still, you mentioned the regulators.
Yeah.
When looking into this area, is there any barriers, or is it actually something that helps you in your space?
Barriers, you mean, of course, you have to consider any kind of privacy legislation, like GDPR and so on. So you need to know that this is maybe another data processing use case that you need to make transparent in terms and conditions. So these kind of things have to be considered, of course. Otherwise, I don't personally know of specific challenges we had from regulators when applying this. But also have to say I'm not an expert on the use case in fraud and money laundering prevention. So these are other teams that do that. Maybe they could say more to that.
And also maybe it's a learning journey as well together.
Sure.
With the regulator and us as a business, the more different cases progress. So thank you, Georg, so much for the insights that you gave, and for those of you that will be joining basically for the networking afterwards, we will have still time to exchange. So thanks so much, Georg, and looking forward to networking later. Huh?
Thank you very much.
Georg.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, Georg.